No one ever really dies. Everyone exists forever. It's just a matter of where. Either heaven or hell. Do you know the details about the differences? That's what I'm here to talk about. Shalom, my friends. I'm here to talk to you about the Shamayim, heaven, and about Sheol, hell, the pit, Abaddon, the abyss. I'll give you all the details. But first, let's start with heaven. The word that we see that the Father gave for this topic is Shamayim. Now, I've told you a number of times, many videos, that when you see im, I-M, on the end of any Aramaic Hebrew word, it's a plural term. The singular would be Shemach. That would be heaven, but that word never appears anywhere in the Word. From Genesis through Revelation, you only see Shamayim. That would be heavens, plural. Very interesting, and that makes me think of John chapter 14. That's Yochanan 14 verse 2, where Yeshua says, "In my Father's house are many staying places. And if not, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you." That's an exciting thought right there. And we could go on and on. But in my Father's house, he says, are many staying places. And that means a lot to me when I think about Shamayim being a plural term, and the only term you ever see in the word. It's never singular. Why? Because in the Shamayim, the Father has many places. Let's take a look at Shamayim as it appears in the Odiot, the original, most ancient Aramaic Hebrew pictographic letters. We have Shin, Mem, Yod, Mem. Shin and Mem, you have Sham, Yod, Mem, Yim, Shamayim. Shin, it's a picture of two front teeth. Has to do with cutting and separating things. Mem, we see this one quite frequently in my videos. It's a picture of water or blood, specifically the blood of Yeshua, salvation. Water is the word. The word washes us. And also Mem has to do with mightiness, as in the great and mightiness of the sea. Yod, picture of an arm and a hand, has to do with actions and work. In this case, the actions and the work of Elohim, the Father, His Son, and His Ruach, His Spirit. And then we have Mem again. Once again, I think this happened recently, Yod is sandwiched between Mem on either side. So there's a strong statement here about the work and the actions of the Father through the blood of Yeshua, and His Word, which washes us clean. And the Word washes us clean. As we study the Father's Word, our minds are renewed and transformed. We are washed by the Word, but the Word is also Yeshua. He washes us clean. His righteousness begins to take over in our lives as we make Him our Adon, our Master. And Sheen, two front teeth, has to do with cutting and separating. In this case, we're talking about the Shamayim, the heavens. They are all about the work and the actions of the Father and His Son and His Ruach, and the effect of His Son and His Word, and separating. Again, Shamayim, that's why it's plural, because separating, there's all many Shamayim. There's many, how did the word put it in Yochanan? Was many staying places. There are many places in the Shamayim. Now, in the Word, we see three types of Shamayim. Number one, we see in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 18, space, the sun, the moon, and the stars, beyond the earth's atmosphere. Number two, Genesis chapter 1 again, verses 20 through 26, we see the earth's atmosphere, where birds fly. That is Shamayim. And again, the fact that it's plural, it's not just one place that we look at. And then number three, and I'll have more to say about this in a little bit, is the third Shamayim, the abode of the Father, which is unseen. And we see that in 2 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2. In John, Yochanan, chapter 6, verse 38, we see that Yeshua came to the earth from the Shamayim. And, of course, He came from the third Shamayim, where the Father dwells. Isaiah, let's take a look at this one. Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah says, I saw Yahuwah sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of His robe filled the Heichal. Above it stood seraphim. This is a type of messenger, a type of angel. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh. It's a word we usually see as holy. Is Yahweh of hosts. All the earth is filled with His esteem. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. So there we see Isaiah speaking of Yahweh's throne in the Shamayim, which is also the abode of the Malachim HaKodesh, the holy messengers, the holy angels. In Revelation chapter 4, verse 1, we see Yochanan, John, was caught up into the Shamayim. You look at I said I was going to get to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2, where Shaul, that's Paul, he talks about a man who was taken up to the third heaven. That's he's talking about himself. It's a bit of a Hebrewism where a rabbi will often talk about himself in the third person. But he's talking about himself, a man who was caught up to the third heaven. This is where the Father dwells. This is also the future, because the Father is outside of time. When John was caught up into the Shamayim in Revelation chapter 4, he was brought into the future to see things. But the Father's outside of time. So that's the third heaven where the Father dwells, the third Shamayim. 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. Peter's real name is Kepha. Kepha talks about how the Shamayim existed, past tense, and refers to the days before the flood, with Noah. That's verses 5 and 6. But then he refers to the present Shamayim in verse 7, which is reserved for fire being kept for Judgment Day. My personal interpretation of what Kepha is talking about there is that the first Shamayim is what existed before Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, which Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning Elohim created the Shamayim and the earth. Verse 2, the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep. The earth came to be formless and empty, with darkness on the face of the deep. I believe the first Shamayim is what existed before the earth came to be formless and empty. The second Shamayim, where Kepha is talking in verse 7, is what we are presently a part of. And then the third Shamayim would be the abode of the Father, who's outside of time. This is what we will know after the millennium, when a new Shamayim and a new earth will be created. Revelation chapter 21, verse 1. Now, that's Shamayim, heaven. Let's take a look at the odiot for the word we often see as hell, but the Aramaic Hebrew word is Sheol. And that is Shin, Aleph, Waw, Lamed. Shin, Aleph, She, Waw, Lamed, Ol. Sheol. Shin, again, two teeth, cutting, the two front teeth, cutting, separating things. Then we have Aleph, picture of the ox head, has to do with being yoked to the Father. In this case, being yoked to the Father or being yoked to darkness. The Aleph also has to do with being taught by your headship, whether it's the Father or darkness. I'll elaborate on this in a minute. Then we have Waw, the tent peg. Pitch your tent with Elohim, or, in this case, with darkness. I'll be elaborating. And then we have Lamed, picture of a staff, being yoked to the teacher of the sheep. Now, so, Sheol has to do with things being separated, people being separated, according to, and that's Sheen, and then according to Aleph, who their headship is, who they're yoked to, who they're being taught by. Wa, who they're pitching their tent with, or what they're pitching their tent with. Pitching your tent, building your house, building your life with, you might say. And Lamed, very similar to Aleph, who they're being yoked to and who they're being taught by. That's Sheol. Now, Sheol is also known as hell and the grave. Prior to the awesome work of Elohim, performed through Yeshua on the earth 2,000 years ago, Sheol was located in the bowels or in the center of the earth. Most English translations of the word use hell instead of the Aramaic Hebrew Sheol, or instead of the Greek word Hades. But Sheol, Aramaic Hebrew, or Hades in the Greek, either one has no singular definition in the word, and so hell is an absolutely incorrect word, except when referring to Abaddon or to the pit. I'll explain that in a minute too, or I'll elaborate on that in a minute. Sheol or Hades is a temporary holding place, or it refers to a temporary holding place, and had, prior to Yeshua doing his work on the earth, Sheol had two sides to it. One side, Abraham's bosom, for righteous believers. The other side, hell, Abaddon, the pit. Take your pick of those terms, they're all synonymous. And that side was for the unrighteous, the unbelievers. Now, this side, hell or Abaddon or the pit, also contained two deeper sections known as the abyss and Tartarus. Now, just make a note that those who were in Sheol on either side were not asleep or unconscious. Take a look at Isaiah, Yeshayahu, chapter 14. In fact, I'll read it to you. And we want to look at verses 9 and 10, where we read, the grave, that would be Sheol, from beneath, in the center of the earth, is excited about you. Now, if you read on earlier, you see Hashatan, Satan, is being spoken of here. And in verse 9 it says, the grave from beneath is excited about you, to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you, all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones all the sovereigns of the Gentiles. Gentiles being all the nations other than Israel. Verse 10, all of them respond and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? Verse 11 goes on, your arrogance has been brought down to Sheol, the grave, and the sound of your stringed instruments, the maggot is spread under you, and worms cover you. They're talking. They're thinking, they're questioning. They are not asleep, they are not unconscious. Now, prior to Yeshua coming and doing his work 2,000 years ago, there was a great chasm between these two sides. Abraham's bosom, where all the righteous believers are, and hell, the other side where the unbelievers are. There was a great chasm between these two, and we can see this in the book of Lucas, chapter 16, verses 22 through 26, where we read, "And it came to be that the beggar died and was carried by the messengers," the angels, Malachim, "to the bosom of Abraham," Avraham. "And the rich man also died and was buried. And while suffering tortures in the grave, in Sheol, having lifted up his eyes, he saw Abraham, far away, and Eleazar in his bosom." He saw Eleazar in Abraham's bosom, that side, paradise. Obviously, he's on the other side, unbeliever, unrighteous. "And crying out, he said, Father Abraham, have compassion on me, and send Eleazar to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am suffering in this flame." But Abraham said, "Son, remember that in your life you received your good, and likewise Eleazar the evil, but now he is comforted, and you are suffering. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been put, so that those who want to pass from here to you are unable, nor do those from there pass to us." And the story goes on. But we can see at that time, Sheol had the believers on one side, Abraham's bosom, paradise. The unbelievers on the other side, a great chasm between. Nobody could cross. And when Yeshua rose from the dead, Yeshua was crucified, he was buried, he went down to Sheol for 3 days, took keys away from Hashatan, Satan. And when he rose from the dead, when he was resurrected, the first fruits of the Netchetef, Yeshua was the first fruit. The Netchetef, the rapture, is also a part of the first fruit, part of the first resurrection. He was resurrected from the dead. He led captives captive. And the side known as Abraham's bosom was removed from the earth and taken up to the Shamayim. Now, only hell, Abaddon, the pit, the abyss, and Tartarus are in the bowels of the earth. Now, Yeshua led captives captive. One of my all-time favorite passages, because it's so amazing, is Matthew, chapter 27, verse 51. "The veil of the Mishkan is the temple, was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth was shaken, the rocks were split, and the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the Kodeshim, the dedicated ones, the believers, who had fallen asleep, who had died, were raised. Yeshua led captives captive out of paradise. He led them out of Abraham's bosom. And here we see, verse 53, coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, Yeshua, they went into the Kodesh city, the holy city, and appeared to many. I always enjoyed that, thinking, some kid running home, Mom, I saw Grandpa. He's walking downtown. I mean, I saw him. Some tales, or whatever you want to call them, Hebrew stories, they say that there's some 12,000. There were many. They were resurrected. I believe those are part of the first fruits. I don't know. It's a mystery, but they were walking around town. They were brought up out of Sheol, and because afterwards that part of Sheol, Abraham's bosom, was brought up to the Shamayim, to paradise. Now, hell, the pit, Abaddon, and also in the Greek, Apollyon. These are all terms which refer to a place reserved for unrighteous, unbelievers, unsaved humans only, not for the Nephilim, the fallen angels. The Greek word abyss means the netherworld or bottomless. And you remember I told you before that there were two deeper sections in Sheol called the abyss and also Tartarus. The abyss meaning bottomless or the netherworld. The abyss, refers only to the Nephilim, the fallen ones, and also to demons, and also to the lawless one, whom most people think of as the Antichrist. The abyss is never associated with humans. And again, Sheol, Hades, Hell, the pit, Abaddon, the abyss, and Apollyon. These are all places of temporary confinement, not permanent. Now, Tartarus, the other of the deeper places in Sheol, as mentioned in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, Tartarus is a place reserved only for the Nephilim who were removed from the earth through the great flood. Noah. You can take a look at Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, and also the book of Jude, verses 6 and 7. Yahudah. So again, Tartarus is only talking about the Nephilim who were destroyed during the flood, and takes them eventually directly to the outer darkness, also known as Gehenna or the lake of fire. The outer darkness, Gehenna, the lake of fire, is a permanent holding place. You can see that in the book of Revelation, chapter 20, verse 14. The outer darkness, Gehenna, Gehenna and lake of fire are Greek terms, and they are synonymous. Gehenna, lake of fire, same thing. I always call it the outer darkness. I think it's the best English phrase that paints the best picture about this permanent place. The outer darkness is a place that is completely void of hope. It's a place of total and absolute separation from Elohim. Elohim. Him, plural term, right? Elohim is a term, it's not a name, it's a term that refers to the Father and His Son and His Ruach, His Spirit. Now the term Gehenna, or the word Gehenna, is derived from two Aramaic Hebrew words. Ge, spelled G-E-I, and Hinnom, meaning the valley of Hinnom. This is a valley outside the south and west walls of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. It was a place where kings practiced human sacrifice. It was a place for the burning of human beings, and thus the mention of burning and or fire that is usually associated with the idea of Gehenna. The outer darkness is the permanent, final, and eternal abode of the lost souls and bodies of lost angels and humans. The book of Revelation tells us that death, referring to the body, and Hades, referring to the soul, or to one's living experience, the soul, are finally cast to this place, the outer darkness. Abraham's bosom is found only in the book of Luke, chapter 16, verses 22 and 23. This term implies blessedness after physical death and refers to a place where only the righteous believers dwell. Paradise is a renewed covenant New Testament term. However, the Aramaic Hebrew definition of paradise is a royal garden. Abraham's bosom, as I stated earlier, is now located in paradise, in the Shamayim, where the Father dwells. You can take a look at Luke chapter 23, verse 43, where we read, "And Yeshua said to him, Truly I say to you today, you shall be with me in paradise," talking to one of the men who was on the stake, who recognized him as HaMashiach, the Messiah. And Yeshua said, "You'll be with me this day in paradise," Abraham's bosom. Now, the New Jerusalem, I want to mention a little bit about this. There are three major scriptures that tell us about the New Jerusalem. Galatians chapter 4, verse 26, Hebrews chapter 12, verses 22 through 24, and the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 1, all the way through chapter 22, verse 5. The Kodesh city, the New Jerusalem, presently exists in the Shamayim and is the dwelling place of the Father, His Son Yeshua, and the Kodesh Malachim, the holy angels, and the righteous believers who are in paradise. And the Kodesh city, the New Jerusalem, will be the dwelling place of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Father's Spirit, after the Netchatef, the rapture, happens. Until then, the Ruach, the Father's Spirit, is still here on the earth, gathering the called out ones and the bride of Yeshua. In the future, the New Jerusalem will come down to the earth. Whether it resides on the earth or above the earth is a matter of conjecture. You can look at Revelation chapter 21, verse 2. Now, just to sum things up, what about the believers who died before Yeshua came? The believers who died before Yeshua did his work and before he rose from the dead. They are in paradise, in the Shamayim now, and will be resurrected after the second coming. You can look at Isaiah chapter 26, verse 19. You can look at Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. They will live in Israel, the promised land, in the millennium, the 1,000-year reign, which happens after the second coming. For more on that, you can watch my video about the prophecy timeline. Now, what about believers who died after Yeshua rose from the dead? They are also in paradise, waiting for their bodies to be resurrected and waiting for their bodies to be made incorruptible at the Netchatef, the rapture. What about believers who died during the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation? These will go to paradise, where they will joyfully wait for their bodies to be resurrected after the second coming, when they will reign with Yeshua during the 1,000-year millennium. All unbelievers who have died or who will die as unbelievers, they will remain in Sheol, in the bowels of the earth, until the end of the millennium, when they will be resurrected. You can see Revelation chapter 20, verse 11 through 15. This is the second resurrection. And they will face the great white throne judgment, commonly known as Judgment Day. This day will determine the degree of punishment that they will receive forever. Take a look at Revelation chapter 14, verse 11. After Judgment Day, all unbelievers will be cast out to the outer darkness, Gehenna, the lake of fire. This is known as the second death. What's that? The first death, which we've seen others experience, if you have any loved ones that have passed on, or anyone who has died at this point to the past. The first death is separation of the soul, the living experience, from the body. The body goes into a casket, buried in the ground. The soul, the living experience, goes up to the Shamayim, to paradise, or unbelievers, they go to the bowels of the earth in Sheol. The second death, where the first death is separation of soul from body, the second death is separation of the soul from Elohim. Separation of the soul, the living experience, from the Father, from His Son, and from His Ruach. Take a look at Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, Revelation chapter 2, verse 11, Revelation chapter 20, verse 14, Revelation chapter 21, verse 8. Now, in closing, as I said at the very opening of this video, no one ever really dies. Everyone, absolutely everyone, exists forever. It's just a matter of where. Either paradise or Sheol, eventually the outer darkness. Either with the Father and His Son and His Malchut, his kingdom, or completely and utterly separated from him or them. Now, don't kid yourself. Paradise, eternity, heaven, the Shamayim, it's not a place where angels play harps floating around on clouds. Honestly, I've talked to a lot of people who think, like, they don't want to leave here because, if they go to heaven, like forever, what do? We sit around and play harps? No, man. Paradise is a place where people live in glorious homes. It's all about family. The Father wants to play with his children. We're going to have homes. Yeshua said, in my Father's house there are many mansions, many dwelling places, wonderful picnics and family involvement. Now, it's also a place where you do something very special, where you do something that you were created to do. I doubt any of us really know what we were created for. I mean, in paradise, in eternity, and I talk about that because I hope I'm not talking to anybody who's going to the outer darkness. I mean, I don't even want to think about what that's about. But for believers, throughout all of eternity, we have jobs to do, and the Father created each and every one with very special talents. Most of us don't even know what those are. Some of us maybe do, and if we're doing it now, we're scratching just such a thin part of the surface, we don't really know the depth and the beauty and the wonder of it all. But there is something that you, my friend, were uniquely created to do, and when you get to eternity, you're going to rejoice in knowing that. Something that will satisfy you beyond your wildest dreams. Do you desire to live in paradise throughout eternity? Do you know what it means? Do you know that you will be in paradise and not in the outer darkness? If you're not sure, pray to the Father. Tell him that you know you're a sinner. Confess that you are a sinner to him and that you want to receive him and his Son, Yeshua, as your Adon, as your master. Tell him you believe in his Son, Yeshua, and that Yeshua came here from the Shamayim, that Yeshua is the Father's only unique Son who died and rose again to pay the price for all your sins, past, present, and future. Tell him that you want to commit yourself to seeking, with his help, the knowledge of him and his Son. Ask him to fill you with his Ruach, his Spirit. Tell him you want to be born from above. And close your prayer in the name of his beloved Son, Yeshua. And that name is Yahweh. Say that prayer from your heart. And then don't forget about it. Look for him to answer you every day. The Father wants to be number one on a list of one in your life. Make him number one. Give him the first part of your day. The first part. When you get up, turn to him immediately and just lift your hands and say, Father, please reveal yourself to me this day. Reveal your Son to me this day. Reveal your Ruach to me this day. What does that take? 20 seconds? Can you do that? Will you commit yourself to that? If you do, your life will change, my friends. Anyway, that's it for this week. As always, I hope and I pray that this teaching has been a berachah to you and yours. Thank you for your support. Until next week, shalom, my friends.
Now 2,000 years have gone by, it's another working day. Some would rather let it lie, but the question still remains.